Hello and welcome to the morning sports briefing here on Tuesday, the 23rd of June. Japan pulls out of Women's Football World Cup race. Pakistan trio test positive. Warriors players feeling responsible. NZNBL kicks off and noose found in stall. Yes, it is a bumper edition of news this morning from around different sports, such your best way to start the day up to date with the important sports news. Don't forget that not only can you watch us live on Facebook, on our Facebook page, so do like that so you don't miss out, but you can also listen to us on the move. As if you download the podcast, you can just search for New Zealand Sports Radio on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favourite podcatcher. And let's just jump straight into that football news. And yes, Japan, one of three countries that were bidding to host the FIFA Women's Football World Cup, has pulled out. This is for the 2023 edition of that tournament. And on the face of it, that will help the Australian and New Zealand bid as Australia is part of the Asia conference or the region rather than the Oceania region, which obviously New Zealand is part of. And the Oceania region has already pledged their support for the bid. So you would hope that this would now bring all of the Asian bids in as well. The only remaining competitor is now Colombia, after Brazil pulled out earlier, and Brazil has now stated that they're backing the Colombia bid. A bit of controversy comes around the way that FIFA or the scores that FIFA has given. So in the official report, the joint bid between Australia and New Zealand got 4.1 out of 5. Japan got 3.9, and Colombia got only 2.8. So you would have to say that off the FIFA ranking, that the joint bid between Australia and New Zealand has got to be the favourite there. Colombia, or the South American Football Federation, have written to FIFA complaining about the bids evaluation, but FIFA stood by their report. FIFA is committed to conduct an, in quotes, an open, ethical, and thorough bidding process. So there you go, and it will include an open vote. Hello, rugby. Do you hear what those are? Open votes. So you know, there's no guessing as to who has voted for what there. That brings you up to speed with our with our football news. I'm going to hand you now over to Arthur, who's going to take us through our cricket update.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning to our viewers and listeners out in the interweb. Yes, as Paul has mentioned, Pakistan trio test positive before leaving Pakistan. Yes, as Pakistan prepare to leave for their trip to England, Shadab Khan, Harid Rauf, and Haider Ali have tested positive for COVID-19. They will now have to undergo a period of self-isolation. And the Pakistan team have not started training collectively, but the PCB have directed any team members that have been in contact with the trio to self-isolate. Imad Wasim, Usman Shinwari were also tested, but came back negative. Pakistan players and support staff will be subjected to 3 rounds of COVID-19 testing, as well as a host of other precautions before they depart for England. So there's a lot of COVID-19 water to go under the bridge before the Pakistanis step onto that plane to England, obviously, to make sure they got a squad. And that's why they actually ended up picking close to 30 players for situations exactly like this. Moving on to Australia, and despite CA cutting 40 staff, New South Wales has no plans to let staff go. New South Wales has declined to accept the reduction in grants from Cricket Australia that were suggested by the former chief executive of Cricket Australia, Kevin Roberts. In fact, New South Wales is looking to forge ahead with a plan to invest significantly in the game. New South Wales has 90 people employed to deliver critical cricket services to the grassroots, and they are planning to invest hard to grow the game. And coming up this week on Swinging from the Hip, right here on New Zealand Sport Radio, we will be speaking with a current club chairman and former club chairman on what it takes to run a club. And we'll get their views and thoughts on the difference between Cricket Australia and New South Wales and the different directions that they seem to be taking in this COVID realm. So make sure you join Taryn, Rohit, and myself this week on Swinging from the Hip on Thursday, 8 p.m. New Zealand time, right here on New Zealand Sport Radio. And that's our cricket news for today, Paul.
Thank you very much, Ashwin. And remember, you are listening to New Zealand Sports Radio. And this evening, we have the return of Do You Know Sport? The best sports quiz on New Zealand Radio, the only sports quiz on New Zealand Radio with the biggest prizes. Absolutely. It's bragging rights. And Ashwin and Stephen, bragging rights are all important. Ashwin, have you been pointing out how strongly you've been going in the Belarusian Premier League, or have you are you one of those ones that's a good winner, as it were?
Humble. Always be humble. Always be humble. But yes, it was that we were down. Dynamo Brest were at the bottom of the table there for quite a while, or towards the bottom end. So quite happy to see them now in third position. The big soccer fan that I am.
Our favourite football league in the world, the Belarusian Football League. I'm going to hand you over to Stephen now, who's going to take us through our birthdays.
Yeah, no Belarusian league supporters and birthdays today, I've got to say. Guys, good morning, everybody, and welcome to New Zealand Sports Radio. I've got the birthdays today, and in birthdays today, a New Zealand women's K1 paddling champion with plenty more highs to come, a middleweight boxer who retired without ever being knocked out or knocked down. Steve Hedemeier, born this day, 23rd of June 1985 in South Auckland, New Zealand, is a retired New Zealand professional boxer. Hedemeier is a former WBO Oriental middleweight champion and peaked 14th on the WBO world rankings. Hedemeier has never been knocked out, let alone knocked down in his career. Hedemeier turns 35 today, is a former New Zealand national amateur champion, winning his title in 2003. And his record, as it stands, is 25 fights, 18 wins, 9 by knockout, 6 losses, none by knockout, and 1 draw. So there you go. Impressive record. Speaking of impressive, Lisa Carrington, MNZM, born this day, the 23rd of June 1989, is a New Zealand flatwater canoeist. She won gold in the women's K1 200 metres at the 2012 Summer Olympics and 2016 Summer Olympics, as well as the gold in the same event at the 211 Canoe Sprint World Championships. Carrington was named as New Zealand's senior Māori sportsman and overall Māori sportsperson of the year in 2012. In the 2013 New Year's Honours, she was appointed a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to kayaking. At the 2016 Halberg Awards, she won the Sportsman of the Year and also won the Supreme Award. Carrington celebrates her 31st birthday today, and if it wasn't for COVID-19, she would have been competing at the Olympics next year. But hopefully the Olympics is still on, Paul. Or was it supposed to be this year? Or was it supposed to be this year?
Currently, the Olympics is still next year, but hey, let's be honest. Knowing what's on next week sometimes is difficult to know. So trying to predict what's going to be on next year is difficult. Moving on, and in the live chat, yes, Hugh points out that Cricket New South Wales offers great programs and giveaways to schools, and you've got to say Bay of Plenty Rugby are doing the right thing by by everyone who signs up to or registers to play rugby in Bay of Plenty is getting their own rugby ball. So great to see that initiative by Bay of Plenty. Make sure that everyone has a rugby ball who signs up to play this year. Also, by the way, their merchandise for 2020 is on pre-sale now if you would like to order that from Bay of Plenty. Buck Shelford has come out and says that he sees Hoskins Tutu as a good player, but he needs time to develop before he'll be ready to play at the next level, which obviously is international level. He also rates Akira Iwane's potential, but he says he needs to make sure his head is in the right place and he's playing for the team, not for himself. But he says, yeah, look, he has he's got the attributes that's required. And he says, look, we need to be playing actual eights, not having just generic back rowers. He says the difference between being an eight and a flanker, especially when it comes to scrum time and controlling the ball at the back of a forward-moving scrum. And yes, it's true, we have seen that, haven't we, that some players can't control that ball and it squirts out, putting their side under pressure. So you can see where he's coming from on that one. I'm going to hand you over to Stephen, who's going to take us through our NRL update.
Yeah, good morning, Paul. Well, we've got some more in the way of Warriors news with all that happened over the weekend. Warriors forward Tohu Harris has admitted the players feel responsible for the club firing head coach Stephen Kearney. Kearney was axed following the team's 40-12 loss to South Sydney on Friday night, a game where the Warriors blew a number of opportunities and struggled defensively. Despite signing a new contract in early 2019 to remain in the role until 2022, the club's management group made the decision to move on from the former Kiwis World Cup winning coach. When you look at the final score, I know it looks bad on the scoreboard, but we felt as players that we had let the coaches down. Harris said the plan was there, we just didn't execute it. We had a number of opportunities where we left points out on the field. To have that, the call they made on the back of that performance, the players, we were the ones that let them down. It's pretty disappointing. I'm feeling for Mooks, that's Kearney, and his family now, because I feel personally that it wasn't deserved, especially with the players and how we feel about how we let him down. Kearney delivered the news to the playing group on Saturday afternoon at their base in Terrigal on Australia's Central Coast, with assistant coach Todd Payton taking the reins in the interim. And just a few more bits on teams that are struggling. Paul Gallen, former Cronulla Shark. The Warriors' decision to sack Stephen Kearney was tough, but if you look at the way this NRL season is going, plenty of other coaches will be at risk of joining him. The current discrepancy in the standard of teams and the quality of the games, depending on who's playing, is amazing. The Roosters-Eels game was unbelievable, an extremely high level of footy. Then we've had games like Titans versus Dragons, which at times resembled A grade. I don't know exactly what's caused the difference between the teams and the weaker teams, but I do know that rugby league is a results-driven business, and if you're not winning, you're quickly under pressure. We've already heard talk about the coaches at the Cowboys, Dragons, Broncos, Bulldogs, Titans, and Sharks, and now the Warriors have made a move. Justin Holbrook is the only new to the Gold Coast, but he's probably not under too much pressure yet. But nearly the entire bottom eight have some level of scrutiny on their coach's future. We all know it's a strange year with everything going on, but the way certain teams have come back from the shutdown has been chalk and cheese. Just want to take a great quote from the great coach Graham Lowe. There are coaches and there are coaches waiting to be sacked. And unfortunately, this is the case. Our final leg story this morning is pertaining to English legend James Graham has confirmed he will quit the Dragons to move home to play for St Helens for the remainder of the Northern season. Graham likely played his last game for the Dragons against the Titans in around 6 and will move home to link with his old club for the rest of the season. There were a few scenarios going around and some cause and effect situations back home. I've had to think about things through, basically. Graham said, I had to work out what I wanted to do and what effect it would have back home and also on the Dragons as well. Wasn't an easy decision, but this gives me the opportunity to go home and finish my career where it all started and play out the next 6 months and then move on to the next chapter. Graham played 224 games for St Helens before moving to the Bulldogs in 2012 and played 186 NRL games as well as 50 tests for England and Great Britain in a peerless professional career. And that pretty much very much wraps up our league news this morning. I'll be back tomorrow with more. And I'll throw you back to Paul. Moving St Helens. Have you ever been to St Helens, Paul?
No, I haven't. It's on the wrong side of the Pennines, I'm afraid, over there in Lancashire, whereas I'm from Yorkshire. So, yes, wouldn't keep it to the wrong side of the Pennines, Battle of the Roses and all of that kind of stuff. Is Helen. But talking about different performance teams, you've got to say that it is a very unprecedented times. We've already heard about those kind of terms, but all the teams have had to prepare in a different way for this season. And there'll be those that have got it right, and those who have got it wrong. And those who got it wrong, I think we are really seeing that at the moment. Also, if you look at Ben Darwin, who does he runs Gainline Analytics, and I saw him quote that actually, if you using their analytics of how the Warriors have built their squad, and then actually they won more games than he expected them to. Only one, admittedly, during their previous head coach, but yes, he was actually performing to par. He wasn't underperforming there. So you've got to say that perhaps more clubs need to look more at how they build their squads rather than necessarily how they sack their coaches.
Going to say the stop-start nature of the season, I don't think has helped any of these teams, Paul, especially a team like the Broncos, who started the season with 2 wins, but just can't find a trick at the minute. And I can't quite put my finger at it. It might have a bit to do with sort of preparation, mental state, a whole lot of things. But I guess the NRL is one of those competitions. Once you do find some momentum, you pretty much get on that roll. And some of the better teams are finding that momentum. I know Paul Gallen mentioned that a Roosters Parramatta game, and that really was a really good game. I see Hugh Rothwell has just put a post up. The coach of the Roosters, Trent Robertson, has said that the COVID experience will lead to changes in the way he runs his pre-seasons in the future. So, I'll be intrigued to know what that's all about. Will they be going that little bit harder? I know from a Northern rugby point of view, they pretty much went out hard with their training last year and probably felt once the season was done that maybe they had overdone the pre-season training, because where the difference is the NRL, I think, is a long season, Paul, and I think maybe sometimes you've got to slowly build into it. But what you can't afford is to lose your first sort of half a dozen games, because once you do that, I think you're behind the 8 ball.
Yes, but as Hugh says, less contacts perhaps, and more about learning the connectivity between teams. Teams that have got a settled squad that have been together for a couple of years, I think will have been in a more advantageous position starting off this season, or coming back after the break, because they know how each other plays. They don't have to learn so much. But anyway, thank you very much, Stephen. Moving on to other sports news now. And don't forget, folks, you are listening to New Zealand Sports Radio. Last night in the netball, the Stars bounced back from their loss to the Pulse on Sunday night to beat the Tactics 49-43. The Tactics scoring the exact same number of points as they scored on Saturday when they beat the Steel, but defensively they could not keep the Stars from scoring. The Stars have now got their first win of the season, so congratulations to them there. Our next game is up on Friday, which is the Tactics versus the Magic up in Auckland at 7 p.m. So next game, that's the next game in the ANZ Premiership. Moving on, and talking of live sport, the Sal's NBL kicks off this evening. Well, you're not supposed to kick it in basketball, but it starts this evening. 2 games this evening: the Airs versus the Giants and the Rams versus the Huskies. So congratulations to the Sal's NBL. I know they've put a lot of work to get this season up and running, and they are really trying to get their women's season up and running as well. So there's a lot of work going in there. Remember, I was part of the draft for these teams this season, but unfortunately didn't get drafted. I could have been playing. They just don't know what they're missing out on. But yeah, do catch that tonight. It's live on Sky Sports. Over in the golf, and Webb Simpson has won the RBC Heritage with 22 under, and so had a chance to birdie the last and to create a playoff, but just missed. He finished on 21 under, and then Hatton and Berger with 2 further shots back. This was a very exciting last day, with at one point 6 players sharing the lead. But Simpson continues his good form He won the last tournament before shutdown as well. Moving over to the America's Cup, and race director Ian Murray has been talking about how he's going to try and run the event. Auckland has 5 courses designed for racing, and he says that choosing each course will be dependent on the wind direction that day. They'll be trying to run it as close to shore as possible, so off Takapuna Beach and around the North Head on Auckland's North Shore, so that as many people as possible can watch the racing live. Also, a few other things that have changed is that we'll have uphill, we're on water here, folks, upwind starts as well. So there's that will be part of it. But he's saying, look, with these race boats being so powerful, so quick, and with that tragic crash in training, the last over in San Francisco, where a sailor died, so obviously they'll need to keep this as safe as possible when you're talking about these boats really racing on the limit. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it all goes. The lack of testing that the teams have had, and the lack of racing against each other, also leads a level of intrigue between because no one knows really what level these boats are at. It's going to be really exciting when it gets on the water. A topic that we were talking about pre-show in the tennis, where the Adriana Tour has led to COVID or positive COVID tests. Bulgarian world number 19 Dimitrov has Grigor Dimitrov tested positive for coronavirus and pulled out of the last day of the event. The event kept on going though, and Bora Koric then also tested positive, but he after he'd played on Sunday. The players were told that they were supposed to be social distancing, but that didn't really seem to take place when Dojkovic put his arm around Koric, for example, before their last game on Sunday. Even though the tournament did say that they had been taking precautions, the players were seen playing football, basketball, and basically hanging around each other, and did not appear to be social distancing. So Dojkovic has not yet been tested. We'll see how that goes and how many more players at that tournament might come down. In very serious news over in the USA, in NASCAR, Bubba Wallace's racing stall, they found a noose in there. The NASCAR has come out and said, "We are," and this is to quote them, "We are angry and outraged and cannot state strongly enough how seriously we take this heinous act." And they are looking to find out who is responsible and eliminate them from the sport. This is in reaction to NASCAR banning the Confederate flag from their races and their venues. And Bubba Wallace was one of the people who was the person who was leading the call for that. So clearly, it is a very serious thing that's happening over there in NASCAR. There was somebody flying a small plane over the latest race saying "defund NASCAR" as well. So look, it is issues over in the States with Bubba Wallace's car that has the Black Lives Matter logos on it as well. You've got to say, yeah, it is causing a lot of things, and let's hope people can sit down and talk and sort out these issues, and also find that person who put that noose in there. They need to be banned from all of that. You've now started the day the best way, up to date with all the important sports news. Don't forget to join us this evening at 8 p.m. For Do You Know Sport? And we'll be back tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. with the morning sports briefing.